My name is Chukwuemeka. I am a soldier in the Biafran army. When the Civil War started 3 years ago, I left my wife Adaku and our 2 young children Uche and Chioma in our village to go fight for Biafra. I haven't seen them since then. The war has been terrible. So many people have died. Our side is losing badly. The Nigerian army has taken almost all of our land. We are running out of food, medicine and weapons. Our leaders look tired and afraid. Some soldiers have started to run away. I want this war to end so I can go home, but I don't know if I will survive. Yesterday, my battalion got orders to pull back from a town we were defending. The Nigerian soldiers were coming with tanks and artillery, and we didn't have enough ammunition to fight them. As we were retreating, their air force bombed the road we were on, creating a huge crater that blocked our vehicles. Then, they started shelling us. It was chaos. All around me, men were screaming as they got hit by shrapnel or gunfire. Our lieutenant ordered us to run into the bush for cover. I ran as fast as I could into the trees. I could hear bullets hitting the leaves around me. My heart was pounding. I didn't stop running until I couldn't hear gunshots anymore, but I was lost. I didn't recognize this part of the bush. I wandered around for hours looking for my unit or a road, but everything looked the same. It started to get dark. I was all alone. I found a grassy spot under a big tree and lay down to rest for the night. It was cold. I missed my wife's warm body next to mine. I thought about how hungry Uche and Chioma must be. Food is so scarce now. Some days the only thing to eat is cassava. I hoped Adaku was keeping them safe, but I knew she was probably struggling without me there. A painful knot grew in my stomach. Were my children even still alive? The next morning, I woke up covered in dew but alive. I said a prayer of thanks to God. I found some berries on a bush nearby and ate them to get some strength. Then I started walking again, hoping to find a village or even just a road. Around midday, I came out of the bush into a cassava field. In the distance, I could see a small compound with a few huts and cattle. Smoke rose from a cooking fire. At last, people! I walked quickly towards it, my stomach rumbling. But as I got closer, I froze. The people were dressed in dirty northern robes and turbans. These were Hausa villagers, not Igbo like me. I had stumbled into Nigerian-held territory. Fear shot through me. If they realized I was a Biafran soldier, they would kill me or take me prisoner. I crouched in the bushes trying to decide what to do. Should I risk going into the compound to beg for food? Or maybe I could sneak in at night and steal some cassava. But what if they had guns? I watched the women cooking and the children playing for over an hour, torn between my hunger and my fear. Suddenly, a young goat ambled up near my hiding spot, munching grass, oblivious to my presence. Without thinking, I jumped out and grabbed it. The goat bleated loudly in protest as I tucked it under my arm and ran back into the bush with my heart pounding. When I was a safe distance away, I broke its neck and said a quick prayer of thanks for the meat. I built a small fire and roasted some of the goat, eating the first fresh meat I'd had in weeks. The rest, I cut into strips that I let dry in the sun to preserve it. Meat for many more meals. God had provided for me. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed on the move, avoiding any villages as I headed slowly southwest, surviving on goat meat and whatever berries and roots I could gather. My clothes grew tattered and filthy. I had blisters on my feet from my worn-out boots. I dreamed every night of home, worried if it was even still there. One morning, I came up over a hill and looked down at a beautiful valley. A river flowed through the middle, fed by a tall waterfall. Along the river were cultivated fields and clusters of round thatched huts. Igbo huts. I had found a Biafran village. I stumbled down the hillside, weak with relief. As I entered the village, weary, stained people drew back in fear until they realized I was Biafran. Then they gathered around, excited to see a soldier. A young woman brought me a calabash of water. I drank it greedily. An older man took me into his hut and gave me a bowl of yam porridge that I ate so fast I almost threw it up again. While I ate, I asked if anyone had news of my village Umunachi, just west of Owerri. The man just sadly shook his head. No news meant anything could have happened. After I had eaten, the man said I could stay and rest here as long as I wanted. I was too exhausted and discouraged to move on yet. I stayed with his family for a week, helping in the fields during the day and playing with the children to make them laugh. It felt good to sleep on a mat each night and have company. The kindness of these people lifted my spirits, even as their own hardship weighed on me. I hoped my own family was safe somewhere getting help like this. But after a week, I knew I had to move on and try to find my way back to them. The morning I left, the man pressed some cassava flour and dried fish into my hands. His wife gave me a gourd of water. They wished me well, their eyes sad but hopeful. I set off again in what I hoped was the direction towards home. The landscape became more familiar as I walked. Hills I recognized, roads I had traveled before the war. Sometimes I would come across small groups of refugees on the move and walk with them for a day, sharing news. Everyone looked exhausted and ragged. At night, I would hear far-off rumbles of artillery and see flashes on the horizon where the fighting still raged, but fewer and further between now. As I drew closer to Owerri, I started passing through places I knew. My friend Obi's village, the market where Adaku sold her pottery. My heart lifted at these familiar sights, even though there was less to recognize now than to mourn. Whole villages lay abandoned, many structures bombed and burned. Livestock roamed untended. Gardens were overgrown with weeds. I began to fear what awaited me back home. After 2 weeks of walking, I finally made it back to my village. As I came down the hill overlooking it, my knees almost buckled in shock. Umunachi was gone. Just a few charred beams and crumbling clay walls remained of the huts. Scorched patches marked where cooking fires had once burned. All the people were gone. I stood there shaking my head in disbelief. What had happened to my family? I searched through the rubble of our hut, finding a few broken bowls from Adaku's pottery, but nothing else left intact. I walked from hut to hut looking for any sign of what had happened. The cassava fields and yam mounds were choked with weeds. In one hut I found a dog skeleton, the bowl by its side, long empty of food. That night I sat by a small fire built on the ruins of my old cooking spot. For the first time since this long, painful journey began, I put my face in my hands and cried. I didn't even know if my family was alive or dead. How would I ever find them again? The next day I walked to Obi's village. His hut was empty too. I shouted his name, but only echoes replied. His yam crop had been harvested though, so they must have fled at the approach of Nigerian troops, not been harmed here. That gave me a small bit of hope. Someone had survived. I walked on to Adaku's village. Again, all the huts were empty. But in the center of the village was a huge silk cotton tree, ancient and huge. Something about it drew me closer. Under it I saw faded etching on the trunk. My heart jumped. It was Adaku's work. She had written the story of their exodus here. The story said the Nigerian planes had bombed the village, so they fled into the bush, foraging for months as they moved slowly towards safety in the east. Adaku prayed I would find this message and follow. She said little Uchi had been sick but now recovered. She promised they would wait for me in Umuahia. Tears of joy and relief streamed down my cheeks. My family was alive. I set out immediately towards Umuahia. I walked with renewed strength despite my weariness. At night, I dreamed of embracing Adaku and hugging my children. Now that I knew they were alive, wild horses couldn't keep me from them. I wished my legs were as swift and tireless as a cheetah to run to them faster. As I traveled, I begged food from any Igbo villages I passed. Some days I found nuts or caught a fish to sustain me. That's it for this video, folks. Be sure to subscribe to our channel Pigtales for more stories like this one. Leave a comment letting us know what war stories you'd like to see come to life. Don't forget to like and subscribe for new African tales and fables every week.